Celtic Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics, who have just returned from a trip overseas, a big game in London against the Philadelphia 76ers. John, down by 22 points at one point in the second quarter. I guess maybe about 7 minutes to go in that second quarter. Jaylen Brown, probably one of his shining moments on the season, really trying to dig that team's effort out of its hiney. And by the middle of the third quarter, they're right back in it, and then they wind up cruising to actually what appeared to be a fairly easy victory in London. So, John, here we are. We're back.
Woo!
Woo! We got one game to talk about. That's pretty much the only time that's ever happened mid-season for you and I, but here we are. Literally one game to talk about. Although, as we get our show notes ready, there's plenty of topics.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, it was an interesting game, first of all. And then, I think, you see some things in and around that. Jason Tatum has a kid. I mean, a lot of things happened in a week and a half. We had Kyrie went in depth, I should say, with JJ Reddick on his podcast, which was a little bit overblown in terms of the conspiracy theory stuff, but really some fascinating stuff once you get away from, people being distracted by the shiny object of him talking about flat earth stuff and learning that he figured that out from reading Instagram posts. We're going to put that aside for a second, but the actual fact of how he came to be Kyrie Irving, how he, basically went to his driveway and worked on skills and putting combinations together, through the legs, behind the back finish, and all these things, like how he became who he is as a player. I think it's really good stuff. And I was telling my kids,
it's interesting because of how phenomenal of a dribbler he is. So
exactly.
Everything he said on the podcast about working on those different moves and transitioning from one to another, really pretty exceptional plan for a young kid.
Well, and I had a practice that night with my son's travel team, and I was just telling him, kind of recounting what happened and how he does it, and that's a great lesson for kids. It's like, look, to be this amazing ball handler, you don't need to have like 18 different cones and all these different weird things that you buy. It's just the fact of going out in the yard and doing it over and over and over again. And yeah, he's 6'3", and his dad played Division I ball, but he worked on his craft, and it pays off. And you see this stuff over and over and over again. It was a really fascinating podcast, and I'd say even if you're kind of put off by the flat Earth stuff, whether you believe it or don't believe it or whatever, there's a lot of really good stuff in there with Kyrie and JJ Reddick, two of the better dookies we've had out there.
Well, I liked watching JJ Reddick play in that game. He was the hottest 76er. I thought that was a huge pickup for them. I live in the land of the 76ers. Many of my neighbors are Philly fans, and when they made that signing, I said, that's a great signing. I mean, Amir Johnson will get you some veteran presence, but this is a guy who's going to be able to score in spurts, who's going to spread the floor for guys like Simmons, who really aren't perimeter shooters, but can do a lot of playmaking and finish at the rim with some amazing athleticism. And I thought that was just a great addition for them. But going back to one thing I want to say before we move on, as you talk about coaching your sons, is basically the fact that no sport better than basketball to tell people you do not need a lot of money to be able to learn how to play this sport. You were just talking about you don't have to buy all this equipment to get good. Pretty much the only sport that's diehard like that is hockey. Like, you've got to have cash to be able to play hockey. You need ice time, you need skates, you need gear. But basketball, like no other. And I can't remember the player it was that had like this weird box net, and I think maybe it was Jaylen Brown, but it was somebody showing their old neighborhood. They had gone back and done some video, and I'm going back 10 months now, and I just can't remember who it was. Could have been James Harden. I really don't remember. but they had some totally fandangled basket that if you looked at it, you'd say there's no way somebody learned to play basketball on that thing. I don't even think the hoop was round is my point. And yet this person is, an NBA, I think he was an NBA All-Star. So I'll have to go digging, see if I can find that video again, or maybe one of our listeners can tweet us at CSL Justin and at CSL_Duke. To let us know if they remember that video, but no better sport, honestly. You can do it with little money. And I think, some of the players where they've come from to be able to go on to be all-stars speaks volumes to that. So good on Kyrie Irving, good interview. And maybe just say real quick, I didn't think that this whole London experience was really as blown up as I expected it to be. I felt like it was kind of quiet, actually.
I think the real impact was probably over there, meant to be over there. But what I found interesting from some of the people who were over there, and they said, really in London they could care less about the game. But what it has become is kind of like a way station of sorts for everyone in Europe and really around the world to come to this game. It wasn't so much a fact of, Londoners are really excited to go see NBA basketball. No, it really was just, here's a central point where if you're, if you're from Germany or you're from Italy or you're from, Spain, you take a train, you go over and you're in London within a couple hours, you can watch real live NBA basketball. But in terms of the city itself, not so much tea and crumpets and, talking about the NBA game. Doesn't really happen in London right now.
No, I'm sure it's not something you have of a tea, but I will say you make a great point. And I also want to bring that back a little bit to the draft, and we're not going to go to the draft right away, but I think about a player like, Doncic. Mm-hmm. Doncic. Where did that come from? Doncic. You think about a player like that, one of the question marks is that the NBA game is a lot faster, right? And so I wonder how many of these overseas players, coaches, got to go and see the game in person and actually understand that. Because I think it's one thing to watch basketball on TV and to think about how fast the game is played and how fast things are happening. It's totally another to be there in person. And it would be very interesting to, maybe hear from a Euro coach who hasn't been in the U.S., for NBA basketball to see what their experience with just how much of a fast-paced increase that was. Because there were moments where that really was an up and down game, John. I mean, they were definitely running at certain times.
Yeah, I think there's really got to be quite an adjustment to see a real live NBA game as opposed to what you'd see, even compared to what you'd see in the Spanish league, the ACB league, which is probably the second best league, and even they aren't playing at that level athletically, where Doncic is as well. So to see that comparison, I also want to give credit to Adam Himmelsbach, who wrote a really interesting article on that kind of that same note, Justin. But the guy, and I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Benas, that's B-E-N-A-S, Matkevicius. I think that's how it is because he's Lithuanian. So that's where I'm going with it.
That's a pretty good attempt regardless.
I think I'm all right.
I'm going to give it to you. Yep.
But he was talking about, he was hired in 2014 by the Celtics, and he's the only scout the Celtics have. Many teams have a number of people. And in fact, the Celtics for a number of years, and we've talked about on the show, they've always been kind of not given that due because they haven't invested in the European game. Well, this is the guy they hired after the Giannis draft. And of course, at that point, Austin Ainge had been doing the job by himself, scouting the world. They brought this guy in, and now, of course, you've got Daniel Tice, who's come in here.
Yabusele, absolutely.
So they're certainly looking at a broader array of stars now, and who knows what happens with Doncic? We'll see. If his fingerprints are on the potential of getting him. So it's just interesting to see how even the Celtics are kind of branching out, and Matkevicius. There we go. He was gonna be at the games there and meet with Celtics staff, even though he talks with them all the time. This is the in-person stuff that you probably don't usually get to do with your European scouting arm. So you're right. I think, one thing he was saying is he's always watching the NBA game just so he can kind of continue to compare what he's seeing every day when he's scouting players to what's really going on and what, the bar that these guys have to meet in terms of the athleticism. And a guy like Doncic, can he meet that bar? I think that's really one of the few question marks people have about him as he gets closer and closer to the draft in June.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can see the floor, you can shoot, and you can handle the ball, you're going to be okay even without that athleticism, especially if you're smart. So I'm not too worried about Doncic, whether or not he should be the number one pick overall. I think there's a lot of question marks. Maybe there wouldn't be in previous drafts, but with the depth of this draft, mirroring or bettering last year's draft, I think that's where it gets a little difficult for him. And I would say, too, we got to talk about the Fultz video when you're talking about overall number one picks and the draft and last year versus this year. But before we do, I do want to remind everybody to follow Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow me at CSL_Justin, and John is at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media, the Facebook page, Facebook.com/CLNS fans. Download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace. And finally, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media for high definition, full length locker room interviews and the Garden Report with Nick Gelso, Josue Pavone, all of the crew. You'll see Trags on there. Good Times, Jimmy Toscano. I think I just gave him a nickname. Good Times, Jimmy Toscano.
Jimmy Good Times.
I hope that gets.
I like it.
The network has to pick that up. That's all I'm going to say right now. Is he just got a nickname? He's Good Times Jimmy Toscano. Boy, does that sound like a Goodfellas character?
No question. No question. I love it. That's
Jimmy
fantastic.
Good Times. Oh, that's classic. All right. Good Times, Jimmy Toscano. All right, so let's talk about Fultz, because somebody right over there in Philly is not having good times. Not a good time at all. And I will, as we lead into this, the video's been out there. He's really pushing his shot pretty hard. It doesn't look natural at all. And then in watching ESPN, Jalen Rose said that basically after Fultz got drafted, what he heard was that Fultz's personal trainer wanted to adjust his shot. Now, if that's true, maybe it just coincided with the injury, or maybe it's the injury is sort of an excuse because obviously they don't want him out on the floor playing the way he's playing. So I don't know if that's a combo or if it's sort of a don't look over here, there's nothing to see here, let us get this thing worked out. You can tell, though, that Brett Brown is extremely frustrated just based on his quote. Like, all I can say, can't put a percentage on it. All the kid needs to do is be able to shoot the basketball. That's what it boils down to. And let's face it, that's what they drafted him for. He was a pure shooter. I mean, remember we were talking last year at this time about looking up the YouTube videos of him doing these crazy trick shots and shooting from all the way across the court and swishing like this. He seemed like a can't miss shooting prospect. Defense was the question mark. Now he doesn't even look like he belongs in the NBA with that shot.
He looks, it's the only thing I can compare it to is Charles Barkley's swing. I mean, talk about a hitch in the shot right now. I mean, there's a staged process with that. And, a push. I think, you mentioned it. It looks like he's pushing the ball. I'm no shot doctor, not even close. But it's painful to watch that sort of thing. And it's not painful in the same way like you see someone's laboring and in pain. It's just broken. The shot is broken.
Painful, like you feel bad for him.
Yes.
To the point where we feel like we fleeced them, but we were hoping that there would be a Tatum-Fultz debate, and there just isn't one at all right now. Right. And you actually feel bad for that club. Taking a different route with rebuilding, but they're kind of our sister rebuilding team on the East Coast. And would be great to build these two young teams up to be heated competitors in the post-LeBron and Cavs era.
It would. I think in terms of the storyline world, it would be interesting. I mean, I'm kind of over the whole Philly thing. I've created a whole bunch of enemies over there after the Philly game on Thursday. Just kind of going after Joel Embiid and his, no-show effort in parts of that game. It would be great. And Fultz is a kid that I thought, as we were going through the draft process, I would be perfectly fine with that kid being here. Obviously, Danny saw something different and saw in Tatum a potential superstar in the making that, I wouldn't say that we were expecting, thinking he'd be a solid player. I thought Fultz would be, had that same superstar potential. And so it's hard to watch this. And, you kind of root for the kid. I mean, I kind of root for the kid. I root against Philly, but I root for the kid.
Think about it this way, though. Think about it this way. Lonzo Ball is a far better player than Markelle Fultz right now. Oof. And that's rough. I mean, I know last year they were 1-2 and they were looking at, is it Jackson? Is it Tatum at 3? There's a lot of question marks after, but those two were almost the foregone conclusions at 1 and 2. Now, Tatum's a little bit of a sleeper that he's better than Lonzo right now, but nobody could have predicted that. But the Fultz/Lonzo thing, now that's a toughie.
Yeah, I think that's, and you knew that Lonzo's shot was going to be a problem, and it's remained a problem here as he started his NBA career. Tatum, obviously, his shot well beyond, not just
it's actually his handle. It's not even just his shot. It's his handle. It's the way he sets up his shot. He had a burst in that Philadelphia game after Brown charged them back defensively, offensively, aggressively, which is really what they were missing through the first quarter and a half. I mean, the first quarter wasn't that bad, but boy, that second quarter, the start of it was quick that 22-point lead got built up for Philly, but it evaporated almost as quickly thanks to Jalen. But then Tatum went off for like 7 straight points or something, and I think he scored 11 total in the quarter, but offensive juggernaut. But even the way he was just, doing that little juke like he was going to go to the hole, and then he pulls up so fast for a supposed non-athlete, his quick twitch muscles are where he's athletic, because he does pull up really quick.
Say quick twitch muscles 3 times fast, Justin, if you could.
I can't even say it once. I mean, I didn't even say Doncic right. I'm tongue-tied this show.
And I think, but it's his shooting. I think in part his shooting has really set that up, though, because you have to respect his shot. So you've got to close out hard on him, because he's going to shoot over the top of you. And then by the time you close out, he's, it's the handle, but it's also the footwork too. The way that he's able to Euro step around some of these guys. This is the comparison that we talked about way back before people, were excited about Tatum, but now we're kind of in a whole nother level. We talked about the Markelle comparison and the footwork that he uses. Yes, he's on the move with the dribble, but I mean, it's amazing footwork, what he's able to do and find his way to knife through the lane. Finishing at the rim, twisting, turning, the slippery eel, the old Kevin McHale moves that he did, from a back to the basket position. Now you've got Tatum with his length doing that on the move, coming from 23 feet out. I mean, it's so exciting to watch. And that's why I think people get so excited. Like, why can't he do it all the time? Then you remember, he's 19. Wow. He's 19. He's a dad, but he's 19.
Yeah, he's a young kid. He is going to be able to do it all the time. And there's not a lot of pressure, which is awesome. I mean, I think really he came into the right spot. The Hayward injury obviously opened up an opportunity. It would be interesting if he hadn't gotten injured, what this season might have looked like. We might still be debating, he's got flashes of brilliance, or he's really anchoring that second unit. I wonder what he could do as a starter. And maybe you don't see Marcus Morris in that starting lineup or Baines. Maybe they do wind up getting Tatum and he gets his due. But you almost wonder how much he would be laying back in the clutch a little bit had that injury not happened. And also, you talk about players that have kind of come into their own. Marcus Morris is back. Definitely during the Philly game, you saw it. He was hitting his 3-point shot. He's contributing again. Whatever was ailing him, he seems to have come out of it. And I think it's going to make this team a lot stronger as they kind of get to the point where they're trying to prep for the postseason now that their schedule isn't so insane. So nice to see Marcus Morris back. I think we need to talk a little bit more about Lonzo Ball and that Lakers pick, and we'll do that in just a second. But first, we're going to do a word from our sponsors. So that's right, Hoops fans. We're halfway through the basketball season. Your favorite hardwood heroes have, well, kind of established themselves in their standings, and it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test with huge cash prizes that you can win every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. And the best part, you get to draft a new team each day. See how we're leading into our draft discussion, John? Do you like that? And drafting a team is arguably the best part of fantasy basketball. It might be the best part of the Celtics continuing to be in the lottery every year as well. The only thing that's better winning cash prizes doing it, just ask Dan from St. Louis or Jeremy from Austin. They both turned a $3 entry into $1,000. Like I said, huge cash prizes and bragging rights await only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com and then free with your first deposit for a share of $10,000 in total prizes. That's tonight. Don't wait. Use code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can seriously cash in. That's code CLNS at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. So now that we had that beautiful segue, John, into the discussion around the draft and the Lakers pick, since we mentioned Lonzo Ball and the draft and the depth and Doncic, all of those cats, we got to talk a little bit about the Lakers because I think since the last time we talked, they won 4 straight. I know they lost the most recent one, but they're not quite down there where we wanted them to be in that 2-3 spot in the standings. They're climbing up, but what a mishmash it is. Like, it's a very heated battle for being the worst team in the NBA right now.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's very close how these teams are all kind of in that same area. I mean, basically between Dallas, the Lakers, Phoenix, I think Brooklyn, you could probably include that. They're all within a game or game and a half of each other right now. It's really close. And so you really need to see some stratification of that area. And so it'd be really nice to see, some of these teams, in particular the Lakers, really start to suck it up a bit, or hopefully for our benefit, teams like Sacramento, Dallas, these teams start to turn around. And Dallas had been playing well last week. Brooklyn had been doing all right. They lost 2 in a row. So maybe some of these teams will start to turn it around. Unfortunately, Lakers got as high up as basically a half a game, I think, back from Orlando in the second spot, and now they've kind of fallen back with some wins, as you said. Look,
it really only matters though that pick is worse than the Brooklyn Nets pick. That's really right. What we want to see. That's the icing on the cake for the whole Kyrie Irving trade that would make it all such a beautiful thing. At the same time, if Brooklyn, picks at 7 and the Lakers pick at 6, we're waiting another year. And I honestly have no idea how deep next year's draft would be if we got conveyed the Sacramento pick instead of the Lakers pick. So fingers crossed there. This draft is deep. It definitely, if we get the pick conveyed from the Lakers, you're going to get a good player. The question mark will be, are you picking somebody that you're going to be willing to be patient on and wait a few years, or do you want to grab somebody who can contribute right away? And I think they have the luxury of waiting it out, maybe like on a player like Bamba. If he doesn't go really high, he seems to be skyrocketing up the charts. I don't think anybody from a Celtics fan base perspective is really looking for another guard, although Danny Ainge loves his guards. I think it's that wing or big, and we don't really need wings either, but it's really the big man we're looking for, and there's 3 or 4 of them in this draft. Even Wendell Carter, if they were to pick a little bit later, I think he could be a surprise. My son loves Jaren Jackson, thank you. He loves Jaren Jackson. He thinks that kid's going to be awesome. Those guys are all going to be available. The question mark is, Do you take one of those players because it really you only have to go so low in the lottery and then you don't have a chance to pick them.
Yeah, I think. Well, again, of course, the other thing that could happen is the Lakers could end up 7th, and they could still, win the lottery and get 2nd too, and then we get the pick. So there's that piece of it too, where no matter where the standings are, there is that lottery aspect to this, where the Celtics still could be conveyed the 2nd pick, regardless of how it turns out. So that's kind of another wrinkle in all of this, which was frightening in part when they were the 2nd worst team in the league, but now it's somewhat comforting now that they're the 6th worst team in the league. So there's that. But to your point about the 19 draft, actually I spent a good part of the day today watching, some games out of Springfield where the best high school players in the country were playing. RJ Barrett, who is, the number 1 player in the class for 19 and headed to a certain college, university down in Durham, North Carolina next year.
Oh, man.
I'm cultivating my next
If they don't get Bagley, we'll get the other new guy next year. I see how it's going. Yeah. Well, we'll see. But you and Byron Solomon there on Twitter, did you wind up hooking up for that game and tweeting back and forth? Because he's been getting me going to the point where I'm watching more college basketball than I've ever watched. And then he's like, all right, let's push the limits here. Let's see if we can test Justin and get him to watch some high school basketball. And, I work, I work long hours, as you know, John, but definitely couldn't do anything in the middle of the day. So had to let that one ride. But you were able to catch it. So, all right. So you got RJ Barrett, right? That was one.
Yeah, and Zion Williamson's another guy that's coming out. I mean, it's going to be it should be another strong class at the top. Now, how deep it goes? Is it going to go 6 deep? Is it going to go 7 deep? I don't know. You get Cam Reddish, who's another Duke guy who he's top 5 at least in the class, maybe number 2, maybe 4 or 5. Bol, who I mean, there's probably 3-4 guys in this next class that I think people are looking at. I think for the Celtics needs and looking at where their needs are, this draft class is the one that would fill it better because you have Ayton, you have Bagley, you have Bamba. And I want to give a shout out to Sam Vecini, also a CONS media folk, who did a really interesting podcast on his podcast Game Theory, talking about, specifically about Bagley and his fit and where he works well and where he doesn't work well, and talking about, what the takeaway he and his co-host had at that time was that, well, the Celtics are really good at switching, which should be really good for Bagley, but does he duplicate a lot of, in part, does he duplicate a lot of what Horford does? Do you need more of a bigger presence like Baines to fill that role? Which in that case, you'd rather have Ayton than Bagley. So it was a really fascinating look. If you haven't listened to it, you really should go out and check it out, folks.
Now, Ayton's not really that much bigger, definitely not in the lower body, but I think what they're talking about is the frame in that case, right? That they see that Ayton's body with the broader shoulders he's going to be able to put on more muscle over time. Because I still wouldn't even compare him to Baines, right? Like, I get it. Bagley doesn't have the broadest shoulders, so he's never really going to be like the most physical banger. Yeah, he's a stick, but Ayton's kind of a stick. I mean, He's 260, but it's all in his chest. It's not in his lower body.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So he's not going to hold his own. Like, look, if you're anchoring space for a rebound, it's all in the ass, dude. It's all in the ass. It just is. It's not upper body strength. I mean, it won't. It's not that it won't help him. You know what I mean? Like, he'll still be able to push guys. The kind of give him the forearm and create some space, but all of that is in the lower body, and when you compare Bagley and Ayton, Ayton's legs are like little stick figurines, and maybe it's in comparison to his upper body too, but I have a feeling that they're looking at his ability to put on muscle, maybe with, proper training or just age, because we're all sticks when we're younger, but with that over time, he'll be able to put on that muscle that will give him the ability to dominate the low post. But in some respects, despite the size, maybe it's just Bamba because of his length. Maybe it's not about the strength. It's about the ability to alter shots. Baines does it with his size. Now, Ayton's pretty long too, but but Bamba's freakishly long.
He is, yeah. I mean, he's got that ridiculous, seemingly going on forever length that you see in guys like Gobert, where it just seems like, are you kidding me? Like, where does this end? I think the thing that
like Jack-O-Lantern in the Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I see though is that I would rather have a guy who's more mobile and stout than that type of rim protector. I want a rim protector who does the things like Baines does as opposed to the Bamba. A block shot's nice. A block shot goes far, but to have somebody who controls space more horizontally than vertically, I think is really important around the paint in my mind. So Bamba could be there. Bamba could be the next Gobert, but I think what you're going to get out of Ayton, what you're going to get out of Bagley on the other end, on the offensive end of the court, I think that just puts him ahead of Bamba right now for me. I like the rawness.
I would
of
agree
it,
with
but,
that. I would agree with that. Today's NBA game is very offensive oriented, and this team is already able to do excellent defensively, and mostly thanks to their switchability. So that has a big impact on it, more than even size. But you do need an enforcer like Baines out there. They'll always have to fill that role, but that doesn't always have to be a starter. I think that's the real key takeaway. And they could run small with, you talked about the duplication of Al Horford. I don't really think that's an issue in today's game. I really don't. As long as they can rebound, and that's the thing that Bagley does differently. Bagley is a rebounder. While he may duplicate, I can facilitate the offense, I can run it out on the break, and maybe I'm close to the basket and I'm going to have to develop a three-point shot over time, even though he is shooting 35% and almost the same amount of attempts as Ayton. Despite that, there's still more question marks around his three-point shooting and ability. But despite all of that, it's the rebounding. And he is such a deceptively dominant rebounder. But if it comes near his hands, he gets it. And I think that's a big piece. That's a big difference. And I think it's really what they're getting out of Baines, is a lot of that rebounding. I know it's not always showing up, but his ability to kind of, take up some space down there and make the opportunity for rebounds greater for the entire team. So that part Bagley won't be able to do, right? But I think he may be able to make up for it with athleticism.
But in terms of fit, I think that's where, you've seen two different models, and I think the Celtics going back here since Horford arrived, but even before that, but particularly now with Horford, they've tried to pair the big who can bang a bit with Horford. No, so he doesn't get so beat up and all that. But at the same point, replacement. This is the Jimmy Garoppolo, draft pick in my mind, in terms of building that guy who can play behind Horford into the future. But really, with the way those Celtics rosters...
Well, and with those trade rumors, dude, you don't even know. That could be sooner than later, right? And then you would be grabbing a guy who doesn't really duplicate Horford. He really would play well in today's game at the center spot.
Well, that's kind of my point, is that you need the guy who... You got to take the best guy who fits for what the Celtics do, regardless of whether he's that prototypical banger who you've put next to Horford or not, and so if Bagley can eventually grow into being what Horford is, great. Can he play next to him? I think he can play next to him. I think he can spread it out and do a lot of things. I think Ayton is more of a natural, fills that Baines role, fills that Amir Johnson role a little bit more seamlessly, but I don't think that's a reason to not take one of these guys. You take them because they're the best possible star for where you think they're going to be. Whether it's Marvin Bagley showing the motor now, but maybe needing to be a bit more aware and a bit smarter defensively, or Ayton trying to figure out kind of his background, his history, his motivation, making sure that guy loves basketball in the way that we've seen Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum and Terry Rozier these guys, these workers, these guys who want nothing more than to be
Character
better
guys.
and be the best.
Character
Absolutely.
guys that are willing to do what Brad Stevens wants them to do because they want to play the game the right way. They're not just in it for the money because, and I don't want to say it's easy money because no matter how gifted you are, it's still not easy money, but you follow. It's the easier path than the other options that may lay out before some of these people, Vin Baker. So hey, look, let's talk about, we talked about the standings, but I have a question that I also want to lead to, a photo that we got this week too that needs to be discussed before we close here in about 10 minutes is Utah. If you look at them in the standings, they're 17 and 25. It's a huge fall off. They were right on the cusp last year, as being one of the top teams out in the West, right? I mean, they couldn't quite make that leap, but they were right on that edge. And they don't have Hayward, and now all of a sudden they're like sub 500. They're worse than they were when they were trying to rebuild. Do you attribute all of that to Hayward? And if you do, just how optimistic are you for his return?
That was interesting. That wasn't where I thought you were going to go with that question. I was already primed.
I know, because that's not how we scripted it. I mean, that wasn't in the script. They just threw that little curveball in there.
I know. Well, thank you for that. No, that's good. Well, look, I mean, I think you got to remember that their best player has missed a lot of games. Gobert has played 18 games so far. He's only played half of the games they've had this year, and so. That obviously really negatively impacts them. Even as the West has really kind of taken a back seat. They've lost 4 of their last 5. You go back, they've lost, they've won 2, 4. They've lost 2 of their last, they've won 2 of their last 9. And so Gobert is out another, he's going to be out. I just think that with what you see with Utah, the hope there in the future is Donovan Mitchell. You look at him, unfortunately, you get some injuries to Dante Exum, who probably is going to miss a good part of the year, if not all the year. It's a tough year for them. I mean, just about everything for them has gone wrong since Gordon Hayward left, except for Donovan Mitchell. He's the hope. He's the prayer that they have over there. I don't know that I'd tie their fortunes to what Hayward has done to what he'll do here in Boston. I think that a number of factors have really conspired against the Utah Jazz. I still think that they're a good team and that they have the right leadership. But I am confident about where Gordon's going to come from. And I'm very encouraged, about the next step, given what we've seen, just to kind of tease into the next thing, of late, because I think it shows that he's on pace, just as we have said all along. He's going to come back. This is going to happen, and he's going to be part of the Celtics playoff push.
We're neck and neck with the Golden State Warriors,
yes.
With one of their top. We want to say top 2, but I do give a lot of respect to Al Horford. So one of their top 3 players. We'll be fair. With one of their top 3 players now walking around in sandals, and like you said, likely poised for a return. And again, will he be 100%? Let's set the bar proper. He won't be 100% this season. If he does get back out on the floor, he won't be 100% till the start of next year for sure. He needs an off season of recovery as well, conditioning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this team struggling with a little bit of lack of depth, even if he came in and basically was utilized to ignite the second unit and go out and provide some scoring and just give, some leadership and direction out there in the postseason, that would still be a huge lift. Even though you play a tighter rotation in the postseason because you get the extra days off in between every single game, that's a great thing. It still would be a huge lift during those minutes. If he was only playing 12 to 15 minutes off the bench with the second unit, I don't think we would see these drop-offs like we saw in the Philadelphia game that caused them to dig out. And how many times are they really going to be able to dig out of 20-plus point deficits? It's been great in the regular season, but the postseason's a whole different animal.
It is a different animal. And I think that, you need those extra shooters. You need those playmakers. You need it's easy to say, well, when you've got a guy like Kyrie and he can find a way night to night, but when you're game planning for a particular lineup and you're going to take away the first and second option, the third option's got to beat you. And that's what happened in that Bulls series. They took away Horford, they took away Isaiah, and the Celtics had nobody else to shoot. And lo and behold, here comes Gerald Green. I think that's what's going to happen here as we kind of move into this playoffs. They're going to take away Horford. They're going to take away Kyrie. Now what do you got? Well, now we got an all-star who hasn't played since October, but pretty damn good. We got the rookie here. We got the second-year player. Now we've got some firepower for you. It's really interesting, and we're recording this right now as Golden State and Cleveland's playing, so we're not going to really get into the outcome of that. But we're at this point in time, and kind of off of that, Justin, I'm interested in your thoughts. The Celtics are now 7 games up on Cleveland as we're speaking now in the middle of this game. They are at present, okay, I'm not, they're 34-10, and as I say this, Golden State's 35-9. When Golden State and Cleveland play, do you root for Cleveland now because they're so much further behind the Celtics? Are you thinking about home court in the finals?
Absolutely. You want the best record in the NBA. Who'd have thunk it, right? Everybody's saying mid-50s, low 50s in the win total. Then Hayward goes down. No chance. And do you want to finish this season with the best record in the NBA? Absolutely. Have you already gone through the most difficult schedule with the least amount of practices? Absolutely. Is it doable with a player that's maybe set to return who was supposed to be one of the top players on the team? Yes. And they're the hottest team in Boston right now. I'm not, obviously the Patriots are making their Super Bowl run.
They're 2 wins away from a 6th championship, Justin. I'm just saying. I want to remind you of that.
And I get that, but everybody loves the rise to the top. If you were to tell me, is this year's Patriots run your most favorite Patriots run or back in the Snow Bowl in 2001, you know what your answer is. And that's kind of how this feels for a lot of Celtics fans. They're just coming onto the scene. Like they had a great season last year, but this is legit. To be at the top of that NBA stratosphere, to be right there and poised to have the best record in the NBA. Can they do it? Yes, all of that. And I think if it weren't the playoffs right now, you can say situationally that the Patriots are the hottest team because we're right knee deep in the playoffs. Yes. But I'm telling you, if you were taking regular season versus regular season, and you lined up these schedules, I think the Celtics are climbing up to number 1. So good on the Patriots. Good luck this weekend. They're killing it. I'm still a Pats fan. I'm not trying to down the Pats, but I'm just saying, this is a team with a whole reconstructed roster, a team that nobody expected to have this kind of success. Here they are having it. And I think it's phenomenal, and I do think that they're going to make some serious noise. So, yeah, you root for Cleveland, where Ty Lue says he still thinks they're the best team in the NBA because they have the best player on the planet. I agree with all of that to an extent. They will be much tougher in the postseason than they are now, but you almost have to think that unless something goes drastically wrong for the Celtics, that they'll at least secure home court advantage over Cleveland in the postseason.
I think
there's a little bit of battle for that number 1 seed for sure, depending on, if they do hit a skid or whatnot. But yeah, I think they've got the Eastern Conference wrapped up, and you want to have, not wrapped up, but they are in good position enough that you can root for Cleveland to beat Golden State Warriors. Now, as we look at the week ahead with a couple of minutes left, there's 3 games that are going to be on tap before you and I come back and record again. We've got Tuesday against the Pelicans, Thursday a rematch and final game of 4 against the Philadelphia 76ers, and then on Sunday an early matinee against the Magic. I'm going to say that the team goes 2-1, and I'm going jet lag, crash, although jet lag usually happens when you travel, or at least it does for me, travels more when I head back east. So they headed east, and now they're coming back west. You'd think they'd be all set. But I just think that finally catches up to them. They were a little sluggish in the game against Philly and pulled it out. I think they might get a little out-muscled by the Pelicans front line in this game. So that's my concern. That's my loss. Otherwise, I think Philly and Magic, they both get hosed.
Well, we've got future Celtic Anthony Davis coming to town Monday night or Tuesday night, so that will be fascinating to see how he fits in. I I'm sure this Garden faithful will make sure he knows that he's appreciated, regardless of what Woj said and the questions about the Celtics organization. The fans would love him, and so I think the Celtics fans will do right by him and let him know exactly how they feel about the potential of him coming here. I would probably go actually 3-0. I think that the time off is going to be wildly helpful for the Celtics. Actually, a couple practices in before they played the Pelicans. Not like a typical road trip, and I think that the rims will be level on Thursday night in the Garden. I'm sure that they'll be able to straighten out Philly, and the Magic are freaking terrible. I mean, who really cares? Nobody will probably be paying attention to that Sunday afternoon game. I'll be watching. I'm sure many of you watching will be watching. But let's be honest, everyone at 3 o'clock, TVs will be turned to CBS to see the Patriots playing the Jaguars there in the AFC Championship game. So I think 3-0. I'm bullish on this week. And, hey, how else are you going to get to the number 1 seed in the East? Or number 1 seed in the East and the number 1 overall seed in the whole playoffs? You got to win. You got to go 3-0 on these weeks. They'll get it done.
Well, I think you've predicted more undefeated weeks since the start of the season than you have a week with a loss. You've been confident of the Celtics all along, John. So, a 3-0 week, I would expect nothing less. I do feel pretty confident that they could, but if there's a letdown game in the tank, it's going to be this one against the Pelicans. Otherwise, I think they're actually poised for another hot streak. But that's going to do it for this week's show. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember that you can support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. And for staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.